The morning sun hammered down on the construction site like a judge's gavel. Marcus Chen stood at the edge of his nearly completed backyard oasis, clipboard in hand, surveying the work with the intensity of a conductor reviewing his symphony. The infinity pool gleamed in the midday heat, 16 feet of pristine sapphire water that represented 7 months of permitting, planning, and $48,000 of his savings. Behind him, the modern house stood elegant and waiting, the pool meant to be its crown jewel. "Tiles look perfect," Marcus muttered to himself, making a note. "pH balance is right, just need the landscaping crew tomorrow and—" His phone buzzed, a text from Karen. "Karen, OMG Marcus, emergency. My AC died, can I bring the car over and stay at your place tonight? Kids are melting and my mom's in town too." Marcus stared at the message. Karen was his neighbor 3 houses down, the kind of woman who threw backyard barbecues where half the block heard her laughing, who gossiped over the fence while checking her phone, who always seemed to be in the middle of some crisis. She was nice enough, but they weren't exactly close friends, more like cordial neighbors who waved and made small talk about weather. He didn't want company tonight. He'd planned to spend the evening by his new pool, maybe crack open a beer, watch the sunset, celebrate the project that had consumed his entire year. After his divorce, after the lonely apartment, after the endless second-guessing, this pool was supposed to be his reset button. He started typing, "Hey Karen, I'm actually pretty busy tonight with..." He deleted it, rewrote it, deleted again. His ex-wife used to call him selfish. His therapist had suggested he was learning healthy boundaries, but there was a difference between boundaries and being cold. AC breaking down in July with a mother-in-law visiting, that was genuinely rough. And Marcus, despite wanting solitude, wasn't actually the kind of person who turned away someone in distress. He typed back, "Sure, no problem, come by around 6, I'm ordering pizza." "Karen, you're a lifesaver, see you soon, 222. Marcus set his phone down and looked back at his pool. It glimmered, perfect and untouched. He had a strange feeling he should take a photo. Document this moment, the pool in its final hours of pristine innocence. He didn't take the photo. By 5:47 p.m., Marcus had showered, changed into casual clothes, and set out plates and napkins. The pizza arrived at 5:52. By 6:15, he was starting to wonder if Karen had gotten held up in traffic. By 6:23, his phone rang. "Hey Marcus, I'm so sorry." Karen's voice carried that particular pitch of controlled panic. "My mom's car is in the shop and my AC is still down, so I drove her car over to grab some things from her place to bring to yours. Do you mind if I park in your driveway? My street is completely packed and I'll just be running in and out. Literally 2 minutes." "Yeah, sure, no problem. Pull around back if you want." "Great, see you in 5. She hung up before he could say anything else. Marcus looked out the back window toward the driveway. He'd specifically asked Karen to mention that. The driveway was wide and paved, away from the pool area, which was cordoned off with temporary fencing anyway. The pool sat about 40 feet from the driveway, separated by the newly poured concrete patio and a low decorative fence. At 6:34 p.m., Karen's old Toyota Camry pulled into the driveway. It was a beige thing, sun-faded with a dent in the side and a bumper sticker that read, "World's Okayest Mom." Karen emerged first. A woman in her mid-40s with blonde hair pulled into a messy bun, wearing yoga pants and a tank top, glasses slipping down her nose. Behind her came a woman Marcus assumed was her mother, taller, older, with the same blonde hair and the same expression of determined capability. "Pizza smells amazing," Karen said, coming around the car. "My mom brought wine, the good kind, not the box stuff I usually drink." "Wonderful," Marcus said, meaning it. "Come on in. The place is a bit of a disaster, but..." "You kidding?" Karen's mother extended her hand. "I'm Patricia. Karen's told me so much about you. She says you're completely redoing the backyard." "Just finished, actually. It's a work in progress, but..." There was a crash from behind them. All 3 turned to look. Karen's car had rolled backward. Not subtly, not a few inches. The Camry had rolled a good 20 feet back down the driveway, rolling through the low fence that cordoned off the pool area with the casual indifference of a bull through tissue paper. The car's back bumper hung over the deep end of the pool, teetering on the edge. For one frozen moment, no one moved, no one breathed. The scene existed in perfect, terrible stasis. Then gravity, patient, inevitable, indifferent gravity, finished its work. The car's back wheels slipped off the concrete. There was a terrible groaning sound, the screech of metal, the splash of water that sounded like the world breaking. The Toyota Camry tilted, balanced for one heartbeat on its front bumper before the weight of the engine pulled it forward. The car flipped nose first into the pool. It happened in 3 seconds. It felt like 3 hours. Marcus didn't remember running forward. He was just suddenly at the edge of the pool, watching his inheritance sink. The car sank slowly at first, rear wheels still visible, then faster, then it was nearly gone, nose diving toward the concrete bottom 12 feet below. Bubbles rose in frantic patterns. The sunlight caught the water like diamonds, beautiful and obscene. Corinne was screaming. Not words, just raw sound, her hands over her mouth, her mother grabbing her, saying something firm that Marcus couldn't process. "No," Marcus whispered, then louder, "No, no, no, no." The car settled on the bottom with a silent, final thud that Marcus heard in his bones. Everything stopped. The water rippled. A piece of the wooden fence bobbed on the surface. Bubbles continued their lazy rise, fewer now, slower. The phone in Marcus's back pocket felt like a lead weight. Corinne dropped onto her knees on the concrete, staring at her mother's car and her best friend's pool. "Oh God," she kept repeating. "Oh God, oh God, oh God." Patricia stood frozen, her hand over her mouth, her eyes the size of saucers. Marcus couldn't feel his legs. He stared at the water, at the dark shape below, at the carefully balanced world he'd constructed for himself in the past year, all of it now poisoned with something unforgivable. I parked the car," Corinne said, her voice shaking. "I could have sworn I put it in park. I always do. I parked it." Marcus turned to look at her, really look at her. The panic in her eyes, the disbelief, the beginning of something that might become blame or denial or the horrible clarity of knowing you'd made a mistake that couldn't be undone. "Did you," he said quietly, his voice belonging to a stranger, "set the parking brake?" Corinne's face went white. "The parking brake," she repeated. When I was loading Mom's stuff in the trunk, I went back inside for the second bag, and I think I left the door open, or maybe, God, I don't even know, but the car, Marcus, it just rolled." "It just rolled," Marcus repeated, the words feeling unreal in his mouth. And then from somewhere deep in his chest, a sound tried to come out, a laugh or a scream, he wasn't sure which. It got stuck somewhere between his ribs and just stayed there, a pressure that had no outlet. He looked at the pool again, at his careful work, at the water he'd tested the pH of that very morning, at the satisfaction he'd felt just hours before, standing at the edge, knowing this was his. "I'm so sorry," Corinne whispered. "Marcus, I'm so sorry. We can call my insurance, they'll pay for everything, and I can call my mom's insurance too, and—" "That's your mother's car," Marcus said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, flat, hollow. "It's insured," Patricia said, finally speaking. Her voice was steady, but her hand shook. "It's fully covered." Marcus looked at her, looked at the hand in her pocket where her car keys probably were still hanging, looked at both of them standing there in the growing evening light, on the concrete pad that represented 7 months of his life. "It's not about the car," he said, and then, because it was true and because sometimes the worst discoveries about ourselves arrive unannounced, "it's about the pool." "What about the pool?" Corinne asked, her voice small. Marcus walked to the edge and stared down into the water. The headlights of the car, still on, still burning through the water, cast an eerie glow through the depths. "It's full of salt water," he said quietly. "Everything on that vehicle is destroying the chemical balance. The engine, the transmission fluid, the battery acid. When we pull that out, if we can pull it out, this pool will be ruined. The concrete's contaminated, the filter system is shot, all of it. I'll have to drain it completely, acid wash the surface, replace the filter media, recalibrate the entire system." He turned back to look at her. "It'll cost about 40 grand to fix. It'll take 3 weeks. Corinne made a small sound, like she'd been punched. "But the insurance," Patricia started. "No insurance covers an act of negligence this profound," Marcus said. His voice had grown quiet, which somehow made it worse. "She left the car in neutral, in a driveway sloped toward the pool, without the parking brake. That's not an accident that insurance covers. That's stupidity they specifically exclude." He didn't mean to be cruel. It just came out that way. Corinne's face crumpled. Patricia put her arm around her daughter, glaring at Marcus with the kind of protective fury that only a mother can summon. But she didn't argue. She didn't defend. Because they both knew, standing there as the light faded from the sky and the headlights of the submerged car continued their ghostly vigil below, that he was right. "What do you want us to do?" Patricia asked quietly. Marcus looked at the pool, looked at Karen, who was crying silently, her eyes red and her shoulders shaking. Looked at Patricia, whose jaw was clenched so tight it could shatter. "I want," he said, and the words felt like they were coming from the bottom of a well, "you to leave. I want to call my contractor. I want to figure out how to get that car out of my pool, and I want to figure out how to live with the fact that in one moment of carelessness, someone can destroy something you spent a year building." The beat landed, hard and final as a closing door. Karen gathered her things in a daze. Patricia said nothing, but her eyes burned with something between anger and shame. They left through the house, and Marcus heard the front door open and close. Through the windows, he watched them drive away, Karen's car gone, leaving only a path of water drops on his driveway like tears. He stood alone by his ruined pool as the sun set, turning the water from sapphire to black. The car's headlights continued their strange, mournful glow from below. In the distance, he heard a dog barking, the sound of a neighbor's grill igniting, normal life continuing its normal, unbothered trajectory. And Marcus Chen, standing at the edge of his new pool, now a monument to someone else's carelessness, felt something inside him shift and harden. The next morning, Marcus woke to sunlight and the memory of the pool like a punch to the stomach. For about 2 seconds, he lay in bed thinking maybe it had been a dream. Then the reality of it settled over him like a wet blanket, and he was sitting up, heart pounding, reaching for his phone. He had 47 text messages. Most were from Karen, progressively more desperate. "Karen, Marcus, I'm so sorry. Please call me. We need to talk about how to fix this." "Karen, I talked to my insurance and they said they need to send an adjuster. They'll cover it. Please respond." "Karen, the adjuster said what you said, that it's negligence, but Marcus, I'm literally broke. My mom can't afford to fix her car either. She's a teacher. This is going to destroy both of us." "Karen, you're being really cruel. I know I made a mistake, I own that, but I didn't do this on purpose. I'm a single mom, I'm struggling, and now you're just shutting me out. That's not who you told me you were." "Karen, my therapist says I need to reach out to my support system. You used to be my friend." "Karen, I deserve a chance to make this right." "Karen, your silence is honestly worse than if you just yelled at me." There were also messages from his contractor asking if the pool project was still on, from his best friend Derek asking if he was okay, from his ex-wife, inexplicably, asking if something was wrong because his calendar said emergency today. He ignored all of them except the contractor. He called at 7:03 a.m. "Hey Marcus," Tom's voice came through cheerful and ready. "What's up? You coming by to sign off on the final inspection?" "The pool is destroyed," Marcus said flatly. There was a pause. "What?" "A car went into the pool last night, submerged about 12 feet. Salt water's been in contact with the entire system for approximately 14 hours. I need you to send a recovery specialist, an industrial cleaner, and an estimate for a complete overhaul." More silence. "Jesus," Tom finally said, "what happened?" "Negligence, someone else's negligence." Marcus realized he was gripping the phone so hard his knuckles were white. "How long would a complete rebuild take?" "If the structural integrity of the concrete isn't compromised, maybe 3 weeks. Could be longer if there's acid damage. You're looking at 20 to 40 grand, depending on what we find once we drain it." Marcus closed his eyes. He'd known this already. His brain had calculated it in real time, the way a drowning man's mind still works while his lungs fill with water. "Start the process," he said. "Send me an invoice for your time. I'll be in touch." He hung up before Tom could ask questions. For the next hour, Marcus cleaned his house with the intensity of a man trying to scrub away a stain that ran all the way to his soul. He wasn't angry, or he was, but the anger was too big to be useful, so instead he channeled it into bleaching countertops, scrubbing grout, vacuuming under furniture that barely needed vacuuming. He was in the middle of organizing his garage when his phone rang. Karen, again. He declined the call. She texted, "Please, can we talk in person? I can't do this through texts." He stared at the message. Part of him, the old Marcus, the one before the pool, the one who'd said yes to Karen's AC emergency, wanted to respond. Wanted to hear her out, wanted to find some middle ground, some way to salvage both the situation and his own sense of himself as a decent person. But he couldn't do it. The anger, once he stopped running from it, was enormous. It filled the house like floodwater. He texted back, "I don't think there's anything to talk about." The response came immediately, "Then how do we move forward?" How do we move forward? As if they were partners in this disaster, as if this was something they'd done together. He didn't respond. By afternoon, the recovery truck had arrived. Marcus stood in the driveway and watched as a team of professionals surveyed the situation. They had to drain the pool first, of course. The water, now cloudy and contaminated, began to pump out at a rate of 200 gallons per minute. It would take 8 hours to fully drain. The supervisor, a woman named Yuki with kind eyes and the bearing of someone who'd seen far worse than this, walked the perimeter with Marcus. "I've seen 3 of these go in," she said, gesturing to the submerged car. "All 3 covered by insurance. You didn't have someone else try to move it before the professionals got here." "No," Marcus said. "Why?" "Because that usually makes it worse. Once the engine hydrolocks, once the seawater starts corroding everything." She shook her head. "This one we might be okay. Could be a total loss for the vehicle, obviously, but the pool structure might be salvageable." "How long? Pulling it out? 2-3 hours. Full remediation of the pool. You're probably looking at a full acid wash, new filter media, new circulation pump, definitely new everything that salt water touched. 3 to 4 weeks if the concrete integrity holds." Marcus nodded. He'd already done the math. He'd been doing the math since about 6:45 p.m. the previous day. "Insurance?" Yuki asked. "Not this kind," Marcus said. "This is the owner's liability. She wasn't insured for this." Yuki made a small, sympathetic sound. "I'm sorry, that's rough." The pool drained as the sun moved across the sky. Marcus watched the water level drop inch by inch, revealing the extent of the damage. The car's undercarriage was covered in something like algae or rust. He wasn't sure which. The concrete of the pool floor was stained and discolored. There was a crack, small but visible, running along the western wall. He turned away and went inside. His phone buzzed. Another text from Karen, this time different in tone. "My mom says she's going to fight the insurance company's decision. She says what you told me about negligence isn't legally accurate. She says we have a case. I didn't want to tell you that because I know you're hurt, but I wanted you to hear it from me before you hear it from a lawyer. I'm telling you because I still care about you, and I didn't want you to be blindsided." Marcus read the message 3 times. Each read made his chest tighter. He called his brother David, who was a lawyer in Seattle. It was 2:47 p.m. on a Friday, which meant David was probably mid-deposition, but Marcus didn't care. David picked up on the 4th ring. "Hey, what's wrong?" Marcus told him everything. There was a long silence on the other end. "So basically," David said carefully, "you left your neighbor alone in your car while she was parked in a sloped driveway, and she failed to set the parking brake." "I didn't leave her alone. She decided to go back inside for something. I specifically asked her not to park directly in front of the pool." "But you didn't explicitly instruct her to set the parking brake." "It's a standard driving safety procedure, David." "I'm not disagreeing with you," David said. "But I'm telling you what an insurance company lawyer is going to say, which is, you knew the driveway was sloped and dangerous, you knew someone was parking in it, and you didn't provide explicit warnings about parking procedures." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. "That's insane," he said. "It's plausible," David corrected. "Not insane. And if this goes to court, if they actually sue instead of going through insurance, it gets worse. Because you have the means to sue her for the damages, but that also opens you to being sued for premises liability, for negligent maintenance of your property, for failure to provide adequate warnings." "This is insane," Marcus repeated. "No, this is litigation," David said. "And this is why most homeowners end up settling these things, because the legal fight costs more than the actual damages." After they hung up, Marcus stood in his clean, organized living room and felt something like despair settle into his bones. At 5:15 p.m., the recovery team pulled the car out of the pool. It took 45 minutes, a lot of equipment, and several maneuvers that made Marcus's stomach turn. The Camry emerged dripping, rust-colored water pouring from the windows and doors. the undercarriage streaked with what looked like biological material from the pool. He didn't watch. He sat in the kitchen with the blinds drawn. By 6:00 p.m., the salvage truck had taken the car away, and the pool stood empty, a giant rectangular scar in the earth, filled with nothing, containing nothing, worth nothing. That night, Marcus made himself pasta he didn't eat and drank wine he didn't taste. He checked his phone obsessively, seeing Corinne's text notifications light up and then forcing himself not to open them. She was probably desperate. She was probably scared. She was probably... He put the phone face down on the table. At 10:17 p.m., Derek called. "Okay, I've let you spiral for long enough," Derek said without preamble. "You're coming to my house tomorrow. We're playing golf. We're not talking about the pool." "I can't." "You can and you will, because you sitting in your house alone right now is the worst possible thing you could be doing." Derek's voice had that particular quality of someone who'd known you for 20 years and would not accept a no. They'd been friends since college. Derek had been there for the divorce, the failed dates, the decision to pour his savings into a house he could call his own. 8 a.m., my place. Marcus wanted to argue. Instead, he found himself saying, "Okay." He hung up and looked at his phone again, 10 new text messages. He deleted them without reading them. Marcus shot 103, which was genuinely bad, even for an amateur. He hit 2 balls into the water hazard on the back 9, a fact Derek didn't mention but definitely noticed, and by the 14th hole, he'd basically given up. "Talk to me," Derek said as they stood waiting for the group ahead to clear the 15th. "About what?" "About the fact that you're having some kind of psychological breakdown on the golf course." Marcus gripped his putter tighter. Derek was a therapist, not that he'd charge Marcus for the conversation, but the professional habit was there, embedded in his way of asking questions. "I'm angry," Marcus said. "Yes, I'm angry in a way that feels righteous, but I'm also scared that my anger makes me a bad person." Derek nodded slowly. "Because she's suffering." "She's suffering, yes, but also because..." Marcus trailed off, trying to find the words. "Because I did something that most people wouldn't do. I told her to leave. I didn't help. I just made her understand how badly she'd fucked up, and then I shut her out." "And that bothers you?" "It bothers me because it felt good," Marcus said. "It felt righteous to punish her, and I don't like being the kind of person who feels righteous about punishing someone for making a mistake." Derek was quiet for a moment. "There's a difference between appropriate consequences and punishment." "Is there?" Marcus asked, because it felt the same. They finished the round in silence. Derek only brought it up again as they were leaving. "You should talk to her," he said. "Not because you're obligated to, but because you need to know who you are in this situation. Are you a person who holds grudges? Are you someone who can forgive? Are you someone who needs justice or just resolution?" "I don't know," Marcus said. "I used to think I knew who I was." He drove home thinking about this. By the time he pulled into his driveway, he'd decided something. He would hear her out. Not to forgive, not necessarily to help, but to understand the situation from her perspective. To know his own part in it. To not make assumptions about her future based on one moment. It was a nice thought, a mature thought, a thinking his way toward being a better person thought. It lasted until he got out of his car. His driveway was blocked. Corinne's car, a different one, borrowed probably, a beat-up Honda Civic with a check engine light, was parked lengthwise across his driveway, making it impossible for him to pull in. She sat on his front steps, waiting. For a moment, Marcus just stared. Then he felt the anger, which he'd managed to contain all morning, rush back in like a returned tide. "You can't be here," he said, approaching. "I waited until Saturday," Corinne said, standing. She looked worse than yesterday. Thinner somehow, her hair was greasy. Her eyes had that hollow quality of someone who hadn't slept. "I knew you didn't want to see me, so I didn't come yesterday. But I had to." "Marcus, I had to talk to you because the situation has escalated and you deserve to know." "Escalated?" "My mom is suing you," Corinne said. The words came out in a rush, like she'd been rehearsing them. "She's claiming premises liability. Her lawyer says that you failed to provide adequate warnings about the hazardous conditions of your driveway, that you knowingly allowed her to park in a location that was." Marcus held up his hand. "Stop, you're here to tell me you're suing me." "No, I'm here to tell you before the lawsuit is actually filed." My mom's attorney is serving the paperwork Monday morning. I wanted you to hear it from me first. I wanted you to know that I'm not a part of this. I think it's insane, and I told her so, but she's terrified. She's a teacher, Marcus. She doesn't have insurance covering this. The car is totaled. She's looking at having to replace an entire vehicle she paid off 4 years ago. She's angry and scared, and she's listened to her lawyer tell her that you're liable, and your mother is suing me for her own negligence. She's suing because she's desperate, Karen said. Her voice was shaking now. And because her lawyer told her she has a case, which I know sounds insane to you, but apparently there's actually legal precedent for this. Apparently, when you invite someone onto your property, you have a responsibility to warn them about hazards. There's no hazard with setting a parking brake. That's what I said, Karen's voice rose. I said that exact thing, but her lawyer said that if you knew the driveway was sloped and dangerous, you should have warned her explicitly. That inviting her to park there created an assumption of safety. Marcus felt something snap inside his chest. It was a small sound, like a twig breaking, but he heard it clearly. You're all insane, he said. You've decided collectively that your mistakes are my responsibility. That's not fair, Karen said. Fair, Marcus laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. Fair is me having a pool. Fair is a year of my life not being destroyed. Fair is someone taking responsibility for their own actions instead of looking for someone to sue. I am taking responsibility, Karen said. I'm trying to. I came here to warn you because I don't think my mother's lawsuit is right, even though I understand why she's doing it. I'm drowning financially, Marcus. Do you understand that? I have a mortgage I can barely afford, 2 kids whose father pays child support sporadically, and now my mother needs help because her car is destroyed and she doesn't have the money to replace it. So we're all drowning, and someone has to be responsible, and the lawyer said. The lawyer told you to find someone with money to blame, Marcus finished. That's what lawyers do. I didn't want to blame you. Karen was crying now, the tears coming fast, her voice breaking. I wanted to help you fix it. I wanted to figure out a way to pay for the damages or work out a payment plan or something. But I can't. I don't have any money, Marcus. I'm 43 years old and I have $4,000 in savings and a car payment that I'm already a month behind on. So my mother's lawyer called me and said there might be a way to recover some of this, and I didn't want to pursue it, but my mother is 52 and she's terrified. So I told her I'd give her my blessing to try. Marcus turned away. He didn't want to hear her cry. He didn't want to see the desperation in her face. He didn't want to have to reconcile this image of Karen, struggling, trapped, drowning, with the image he'd built of her as careless and reckless. I'm sorry, she said to his back. I'm so sorry. I know you're angry. I'm angry at myself. I'm angry that I made one terrible mistake and it's destroyed everything. I'm angry that my mother is on the verge of losing everything and all I can do is help her try to sue the person who used to be my friend. I'm angry that this is my life now, that this is what we're doing, but I couldn't let you be blindsided. Marcus stood at the edge of his empty pool and didn't turn around. Please, Karen said, please just look at me. He turned. She was standing there with tears streaming down her face, her body shaking with the effort of trying to hold it together, her eyes red and exhausted. She looked like someone in actual crisis. She looked like someone who'd made a terrible mistake and was now paying a price that seemed to exceed in every measurable way the crime. And Marcus found he still couldn't feel sympathy. He could acknowledge her suffering as real. He could understand it intellectually. But emotionally, there was a wall there, built of righteous anger and the loss of something he'd worked for, and he couldn't seem to cross it. You should leave, he said quietly. Marcus. Leave, get your car out of my driveway, and don't come back here. Karen's face crumpled further. She moved toward her borrowed Honda with the slow, defeated walk of someone moving through deep water. Before she reached the car, Marcus called out, For what it's worth, I don't think your mother will win. I talked to a lawyer, and he said that while there's a lawsuit, there's also counter-litigation, and I'm prepared for that. Karen stopped walking, turned back. What does that mean? It means if your mother sues me, I'm suing back for everything. Damages to my property, legal fees, the emotional distress of having someone take advantage of your hospitality, and then try to litigate you into poverty. He said it calmly, rationally, in the same tone you might use to discuss the weather. It means that whatever her lawyer is promising her, I'm going to make sure this costs her more than she can afford. Karen's face went white. Marcus, no. Don't, he said. Don't come here again, don't call me, don't text me, and tell your mother that if she goes through with this, I'm going to make sure she regrets it. He meant it when he said it, every word. Corinne got in her car, and her hands shook so badly it took her 3 tries to start the engine. She pulled out onto the street, and Marcus stood in his driveway, watching her drive away. And then he did something he wasn't proud of. He called his lawyer. "I need you to file a countersuit," he told David. "Preemptively, if possible, and I want it to be aggressive. I want her to understand that trying to sue me is going to cost her significantly more than she can afford." "Marcus," David started. "Can you do it?" There was a long pause. "Yes," David said finally. "I can do it, but I'm going to ask you again in a few days if you're sure, because once you file, it stops being about resolution. It becomes about winning." "Good," Marcus said. "That's what I want." He hung up before David could say anything else. That night, Marcus stood at the edge of his empty pool as the sun set, turning the exposed concrete a shade of pale gray that looked like bone. He thought about the kind of person he'd become in the past 48 hours. He thought about Derek's question, "Who are you in this situation?" He already knew the answer. He was someone who punished, someone who would spend tens of thousands of dollars and months of his life engaged in litigation to make sure that someone else paid for their mistake. The lawsuit and counterlawsuit began on Monday morning at 8:47 a.m. when Patricia's attorney's office email hit Marcus's lawyer's inbox. By 9:15 a.m., David had filed the countersuit. By 9:47 a.m., Corinne had texted him from an unknown number. "Please, please don't do this." Marcus deleted it without responding. The next 3 weeks happened in a blur of depositions, document requests, and conversations with David that grew progressively more uncomfortable. The pool remediation was completed in parallel. Marcus had signed off on the final acid wash by week 2, watching as the concrete grew clean and blank again like a slate that had been wiped. The new equipment was installed. The water was refilled. The pool was chemically perfect again. And it meant nothing. Marcus couldn't bring himself to get in. He'd stand at the edge in the mornings and evenings, and the sight of it, perfect, untouched, empty of any life, made him feel something like nausea. His first deposition was a Thursday at 10 a.m. in a sleek office building downtown. He wore a suit. David coached him on the drive down. "Don't be angry," David said. "Don't be emotional. They want you to seem unreasonable. They want to paint you as someone who's overreacting to an accident, so you need to be calm, measured, and factual." Marcus nodded, but he wasn't sure he could do it. The opposing counsel was a woman named Susan Webb, late 50s, with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone who'd gotten rich by helping people sue their neighbors. She sat across from Marcus in a conference room lined with leather-bound law books and asked him questions that seemed designed to make him see himself as a villain. "So you invited your neighbor to stay at your home while her air conditioning was broken?" "Yes." "And you were aware that the weather was over 95 degrees that day?" "Yes." "And you knew she was bringing her mother, an elderly woman?" "She's 52, Marcus interjected. Susan smiled. "You're right, not elderly, but she is older and she would be uncomfortable without air conditioning. So you were aware that your guest was in some distress and you invited her anyway?" "I invited her because it was the right thing to do." "And when she arrived to park her car in your driveway, did you provide any specific instructions about how to park?" "No." "Did you warn her about the slope of the driveway?" "The slope is minimal." "Did you warn her to set the parking brake?" Marcus didn't answer. He looked at David, who gave him a small shake of his head. "No," Marcus said, "I didn't." "So you invited an emergency guest to stay at your home, asked her to park in a sloped driveway, and provided no warnings about parking safety. Is that correct?" "I provided no warnings because it shouldn't have been necessary." "But it was necessary, wasn't it?" Susan leaned forward. "Because the car went into the pool." The deposition lasted 4 hours. By the end of it, Marcus felt like he'd been dismantled. Susan had taken his reasonable behavior and recontextualized it as negligent. She'd taken his anger and presented it as retaliation. She'd taken his refusal to help Corinne and suggested it was cruel. And the worst part was that some of it had landed. Some of what she said made sense. He could see how a jury might see things her way. "How bad is it?" he asked David as they drove back. "She's good," David admitted. She's going to make this into a case about your responsibility to provide a safe environment. She's going to paint Corinne's mother as someone who acted reasonably and was put in an unreasonable situation by your negligence. That's not what happened. I know, David said, but law isn't always about what happened. It's about what you can convince 12 people happened. The week after the deposition, Marcus got the interrogatories, pages and pages of written questions that demanded detailed answers. Every email he'd ever sent to contractors, every photo of the pool during construction, every financial document that would prove the value of his loss. They wanted everything, and they wanted it fast. He was drowning in discovery when Derek called. "You need to stop," Derek said without preamble. "Stop what?" "This lawsuit, this vendetta. I've been watching you for 3 weeks and you're disappearing. I'm handling a legal situation." "You're committing financial suicide," Derek corrected. "Do you have any idea how much you're going to spend on litigation? Even if you win, you're going to spend 50, 60, maybe 70 grand to win something that doesn't actually compensate you for what you lost. You lost a year. You lost peace of mind. You lost a version of yourself that I liked. No lawsuit recovers that." "She tried to sue me first," Marcus said. "Because she was desperate. Because a lawyer convinced her she had a case. And now you're doing the same thing, letting a lawyer convince you that spending money and time and emotional energy on litigation is the right answer." Derek's voice had shifted into that therapist tone. "What are you actually angry about?" "Someone destroyed my pool." "No, that's the surface level. What are you really angry about?" Marcus sat in silence, phone to his ear, thinking about this. "I'm angry that I can't just be nice," he finally said. "I'm angry that someone took advantage of my kindness and didn't feel bad about it. I'm angry that I'm the kind of person who, when faced with that betrayal, becomes cruel. I'm angry that the only way I know how to respond to pain is to inflict it back." "There it is," Derek said quietly. "So what am I supposed to do? Just let it go? Forgive them for destroying something I worked for?" "I don't know," Derek said. "But I know this, litigation isn't forgiveness, it's just pain that lasts longer. You're not actually punishing Corinne. You're punishing yourself every day you spend on this lawsuit. And you're not recovering anything. You're just spending money to feel less helpless." They hung up after that, but the conversation stayed with Marcus. He spent the weekend thinking about it, and by Monday morning he'd made a decision. He called David. "I want to settle," Marcus said. "The litigation. All of it. I want to offer to drop the countersuit if she drops her lawsuit. Full mutual release. I don't want money, I don't want blood, I just want it to be over." There was a pause. "That's very generous," David said carefully. "That's very selfish," Marcus corrected. "I don't want to spend another 3 months on this. I don't want to become the kind of person who wins this case. And I want to see if there's any version of myself I can live with when all this is over." David delivered the offer to opposing counsel by Thursday. By Friday afternoon, they'd accepted. The paperwork was signed on Monday. The mutual release was filed Tuesday morning. By Tuesday evening, it was over. No money changed hands. No fault was admitted by either side. It was as if, legally speaking, the entire incident had been erased. But everyone involved, Marcus, Corinne, Patricia, David, Susan Webb, and possibly the judge processing the dismissal, knew exactly what had happened. Marcus went back to work. He was a project manager for a construction company, the irony of which he'd become acutely aware of. He tried to return to normal. He didn't get in the pool. He avoided his backyard entirely, which meant, since his backyard contained the pool, that he spent no time at home at all. He'd stay late at the office, find reasons to grab dinner out, volunteer for evening meetings that had nothing to do with his projects. Anything to avoid the moment when he'd have to come home and face the physical manifestation of his poor choices. Derek invited him to golf again. Marcus declined. Derek invited him to dinner. Marcus said maybe. Derek showed up at his office on a Thursday afternoon. "We're going for a walk," Derek said, "right now." They walked through downtown in the late afternoon, past storefronts and office buildings and parks where people were trying to live normal lives. Derek didn't say anything for a long time. Then, "I got a call from Corinne." Marcus stopped walking. "She wanted to know how you were doing. She was worried about you." "That's not her burden to carry," Marcus said. "No, it's not, but she's carrying it anyway. She said she called you like 50 times in the first week and you blocked her number. She said she didn't want to bother you, but she needed to know you weren't destroyed by all this. I'm fine, Marcus said flatly. You're not fine, you're a ghost. You don't laugh, you don't engage. You've built a wall between yourself and everyone who cares about you. And the person most responsible for that wall is standing in your driveway, apologizing every time she drives down her street, which she says she does a lot because she can't stand seeing the empty pool. Marcus resumed walking. What does she want from me? I don't think she wants anything. I think she's just trying to process the fact that her carelessness destroyed something irreplaceable, and she can't fix it, and now she has to live with that. Good, Marcus said. Then before Derek could respond, I don't mean that, I mean, yes, that's what should happen. She made a mistake. She should live with it. And are you living with it? Marcus didn't answer. They walked in silence for another block. Then Derek said, I've got to go back to the office, but I want you to do something tonight. Yes, because you've decided that the pool is this monument to your pain, and it's not. It's just a pool. It's just chlorinated water. And every moment you avoid it, you're giving Karen power over your life. You're letting her mistake define you. And that's not strength. That's weakness dressed up as righteousness. Derek left Marcus standing on the sidewalk as the sun was beginning to set. That evening, Marcus went home. The house was dark when he arrived. He stood in the kitchen for a long time, not turning on lights, just standing in the dimness and knowing what he needed to do. He walked to the backyard. The pool gleamed under the landscape lighting, still and perfect and somehow more obscene for its perfection. He stood at the edge, looking at the water, and thought about Derek's words. The pool is just a pool. It wasn't. It was a year of his life. It was freedom from his marriage. It was proof that he could build something good. It was the moment when everything fell apart. He went inside, changed into swim trunks, and came back out. The water was cool, clear, perfectly balanced, chemically speaking. He stood at the edge for a long moment, then he dove in. For the first few seconds, there was nothing but the physical reality of water, the weight of it against his body, the coolness, the simple fact of movement. He swam the length of the pool, doing a careful front crawl, and felt something in his chest that might have been release. He floated on his back and stared at the sky, which was turning purple as the sun left the horizon. The stars were beginning to appear, pinpricks of light in an expanding darkness. He could feel the chlorine on his skin, in his hair, and his mouth. The pool was real. The water was real, and he was floating in it, alive and present and no longer running. He got out after about 30 minutes and sat on the concrete, letting the water drip from his body as the temperature dropped and the evening deepened. And in that moment, sitting alone by the pool that had cost him so much and taught him nothing he wanted to know, Marcus Chen made a decision. He got up and went inside, found his phone, unblocked Karen's number, found her contact information from a previous message thread. He typed, "Can we talk tomorrow?" The response came within 5 minutes. "Yes, where, when, thank you for reaching out." He sent her his address and a time, 10 a.m. Saturday. Then he sat in his dark house and felt the weight of what he was about to do, face the person who destroyed his pool, face the actual human being he'd been so eager to punish, face his own capacity for cruelty, which seemed to have no bottom. Saturday morning arrived with overcast skies and the promise of rain. Marcus made coffee and waited. Karen arrived at 10:07 a.m., 13 minutes late, which he suspected was nervousness rather than disrespect. She parked on the street, not in the driveway, and walked to his door with the careful movements of someone approaching a dangerous animal. She looked worse than she had at the driveway confrontation, thinner still, gray roots visible in her hair, wearing wrinkled clothes like she'd slept in them, which she probably had. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi, come in." They stood in his living room, neither sitting, neither quite looking at each other. "I wanted to apologize," Marcus said, "for how I treated you, for the lawsuit, for the threats." "You don't owe me an apology," Karen said immediately. "You were angry. You had every right." "I don't want to do this," Marcus said. "I don't want to argue about rights or fault or who deserves what. I just want to say that I made decisions that I'm not proud of, and I'm sorry for them." Karen was quiet for a moment. Then, "Can I see the pool?" They walked out back without speaking. The pool was its normal, beautiful self again. The concrete was clean. The water was clear. Everything had been repaired. It's beautiful, Karen said softly. Yes. I'm so sorry, she said. I know you said you weren't sure you wanted to hear it again, but I need to say it. I made a stupid, careless mistake and I destroyed something you'd worked for, and I'm so sorry. I think about it every single day. I think about what I could have done differently. I think about how I could have been more careful. I think about how it's my fault. And I wish I could undo it, but I can't, and all I can do is live with that knowledge. Marcus listened to her, and for the first time in weeks, he really looked at her. At the person, not the representative of what she'd done. At the actual human being who'd made a mistake and was trying to move through the world with that mistake as a weight. I got in the pool last night, he said. Karen looked at him. First time since it happened, first time I could face looking at it. And while I was floating there, I realized that the pool isn't ruined. It's just been through something. And so have I, so have you. What does that mean? Karen asked quietly. It means, Marcus said slowly, that I don't know if I can forgive you, but I'm willing to try, not because you deserve it, but because I need to for my own sake. Because the alternative is spending the rest of my life being angry at a neighbor who made a mistake and is now suffering more than I am. Karen's eyes filled with tears. There's something else, Marcus said. My mom. What about your mother? She's having a hard time. The car situation, and she's embarrassed, and she hasn't left the house much. She's talking about moving schools, about transferring to a different district because she's so ashamed. And I feel like it's my fault. If I hadn't pushed her to sue you, if I hadn't. It's not your fault, Marcus said. It's not anyone's fault except the person who didn't set a parking brake, and that's you, and you've paid enough. He said it gently, but he said it, the truth of it, the fact that she was responsible, that she couldn't escape that, but that she also didn't have to continue being punished for it. They stood by the pool and something shifted between them. Not forgiveness, exactly, not reconciliation, but something like mutual surrender. The acknowledgement that they'd both been at fault, him for his cruelty, her for her carelessness, and that the only way forward was to accept that and move on. I wanted to offer you something, Karen said. I know I can't pay for the pool repairs. Insurance wouldn't cover it and I don't have the money, but I've been saving whatever I can and I have $3,000. I'd like to give that to you. Not as compensation, because nothing can compensate you for a year of work, but as acknowledgement that I understand I owe you something. Marcus started to refuse, then he stopped. Okay, he said. I'll accept that, and I won't make you give me the money, but I want you to consider putting it towards something for yourself, something that makes your life better. Because if you give me $3,000 and you're still struggling, then this situation has just made both of us poorer. Karen nodded, and they stood in silence for a while longer. I should go, she finally said. Thank you for seeing me, thank you for trying. Karen, he said as she turned to leave. She turned back. Next time your AC breaks, you can ask to stay here. If I'm home, if I'm available. Because I think what I liked about you before all this, before the mistake, is still true. You're a good person who made a bad decision, and I'm a person who made a bad decision in response to your bad decision. And maybe we can both try to not do that again. Karen's face crumpled, and she nodded, unable to speak. She left after that, and Marcus watched her drive away with the sense of having survived something. Not recovery, not healing, just survival. The knowledge that he'd faced the worst of himself and chosen, instead, to become someone slightly better. He stood by the pool as the clouds moved in from the west, and the first drops of rain began to fall. They plinked against the water's surface, each one creating a small ripple that spread outward and then died. The seasons had turned. The backyard had been landscaped, not the original design, which felt too tied to what had happened, but something new. Trees had been planted, a small garden established. The pool remained, but it was no longer the centerpiece. It was just a pool now, which is what Marcus had needed to make it ordinary. He'd returned to normal work, had laughed again, genuinely, had started to understand himself as something other than the man who'd stood at the edge of his pool watching it fill with salt water and destruction. Derek came over on a Saturday afternoon in October. The weather was cool, the leaves were turning, and there was that particular quality to the season of ending and transition. You look better, Derek said, settling into a lawn chair by the pool. I feel better, Marcus acknowledged. Have you seen Karen since that morning? A few times. She mowed her lawn and waved. We had a brief conversation at the grocery store about her daughter's soccer season, normal neighbor things. And it doesn't hurt. Marcus considered this. It hurts a little less than it used to, and I think eventually it might stop hurting at all. But right now, there's still something there, this baseline awareness of what happened, how it happened, what it cost. Derek nodded. That makes sense. That's probably healthy, actually. If you forgave her completely and forgot about it, you'd just be setting yourself up for the same thing again. I don't think she'd be careless twice, Marcus said. But yes, I'm holding on to the memory of this as a cautionary tale about myself, about how angry I can get, about how much damage I can do when I'm hurting. They sat in silence for a while, watching the light change across the water. Have you used the pool? Derek asked. Yeah, I get in most mornings. It's become meditative, actually. I swim laps, and for that half hour or so, I'm just thinking about the movement of my body through water. Nothing else. No anger, no recrimination, just the physical reality of being alive. Derek smiled. That's good. There's something else, Marcus said. Corinne's mom, Patricia. She took a new job at a private school, better pay, same hours, she's doing better. And Corinne mentioned that she's back in therapy and things are improving. How do you feel about that? I'm glad, Marcus said, and meant it. And I'm aware of the dark satisfaction I feel knowing that even though her lawsuit didn't succeed, she's doing better than she was before, which suggests that maybe the universe isn't entirely unjust, that sometimes things work out not because of what we did, but despite it. Derek raised his beer in a small toast. To surviving your own worst impulses. To surviving them, Marcus agreed. That evening after Derek left, Marcus found himself sitting on the concrete edge of the pool at dusk. The water reflected the pink and purple of the sky. A cool breeze moved through the trees, and he thought about the year that had passed, not the single terrible night, but the entire arc of it. The anger, the legal warfare, the slow realization that he was becoming someone he didn't want to be, the choice to stop, the conversation with Corinne. The hesitant reconciliation that wasn't really reconciliation at all, just a mutual agreement to stop punishing each other. He thought about what Derek had said. You're punishing yourself every day you spend on this lawsuit. He'd stopped spending that energy about 5 months ago, but he was still aware of the person he'd become, still carrying that knowledge like a weight. And maybe that was the point. Maybe the consequence of his actions wasn't something that could be fixed or erased. Maybe it was just something he'd have to live with, the way Corinne lived with the knowledge of her carelessness. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Unknown, hi Marcus, this is Patricia. Corinne gave me your number. I wanted to reach out and apologize for the lawsuit. I wasn't in a good place and I listened to a lawyer who was more interested in money than justice. I shouldn't have pursued it. I'm sorry. Marcus stared at the message. He could have ignored it, could have deleted it, could have treated it as the continuation of something he'd moved past. Instead, he typed back, "Thank you for saying that. I accept your apology, and I'm glad to hear you're doing better. Patricia, you too. Corinne thinks you're a good person. I think she's right. Marcus, I'm trying to be. Some days are harder than others. Patricia, that's all any of us can do." The conversation ended there, and Marcus put his phone away. He looked at the pool, at the water, still and dark as the sun finished its descent below the horizon. For a moment, he was back in time. Back to the moment when the car went in, back to the sound of the splash, back to standing at the edge and watching his year dissolve into salt and consequence. But he was also here now, in October, in the aftermath, in the slow, difficult work of becoming someone who could hold both the anger and the forgiveness, who could acknowledge both his own pain and someone else's, who could understand that sometimes the worst disasters leave the smallest scars. He got up and went inside. The house was quiet and warm. He made himself dinner and ate it slowly, tasting the food. He called Derek back and they made plans for next weekend. He went to bed and slept deeply without dreams. And the pool that had been destroyed and repaired, that had cost him so much and taught him less than he'd expected. The pool remained, empty under the stars, waiting for morning.